The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. The Trump administration moves to terminate $100 million worth of federal government contracts with Harvard University. Sky News investigates why companies are eliminating clothes manufacturing in the UK, pushing Leicester's once vibrant clothing industry towards extinction. Plus, Wall Street awaits a key earnings report from the world's biggest chip maker, Nvidia. Very good afternoon. Welcome to Business Live on this Wednesday with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, the Trump administration has moved to terminate all remaining federal government contracts with Harvard University, which are worth a reported $100 million. Procurement officials at federal agencies were asked to review the contracts for termination and claimed that Harvard continues to engage in race discrimination in its admission process and other areas of campus life. So what does it mean for Harvard and indeed for the university sector in the United States and around the world? Delighted to say we can speak to Professor of Economics at Harvard University, that is Paul Antras. Paul, very good afternoon to you. I suppose the first question is, your reaction or the impact you think this withdrawal of federal funding will have on your university?
Well, good to be there again, Daryl. I think, it's another 100 million is obviously going to have an impact, but it is coming behind a number of measures that are accumulated a much larger amount of funds not coming our way. So it's obvious that on the research front, this will have an impact. There's a lot of research that has been discontinued, and that will have an effect for weeks to come. So on the funding side, obviously, there's a lot of worry. But I think that the main source of anxiety right now at Harvard, it's still the situation with the students that sort of developed last week.
And that's anxiousness or anxiety comes from the very fact that, and we saw this today, the Trump administration are apparently going to go through prospective and current students' social media. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, my understanding is that this goes beyond Harvard, right? I mean, I think the administration has put on hold all interviews for students that were seeking visas to enter the U.S., regardless of the university where they were going to go. So clearly what we've seen as of yesterday is an escalation, not just within Harvard, but a broader attempt to limit the ability of foreign students to enter this country.
And so the fundamental point here is that there is a short term that you seem to be explaining, which is already immediate cuts to research funding and the impact that will have on you maybe and your colleagues. And then there's a slightly more medium long-term effect, isn't there, that many people around the world will look at places like Harvard, one of the world's leading universities, and think again about whether they want to go there or not.
Correct. There's a short run and a long run. In the short run, maybe there's some impact on research, but quite frankly, I mean, it's hard to worry too much about this when you're around students, current students that are about to graduate, had jobs lined up, and are unclear as to whether they're going to be able to take those jobs, or students that are going through the PhD program or the undergrad program, and they don't really know whether they're going to be legally able to be here next year. So, yes.
What are they saying? Sorry, what are they saying to you? Well, I mean, clearly it must be quite an emotionally strenuous time for them.
Of course, yes. I mean, we talked to them the day after the announcement. Some students hadn't left their home. They were worried about, even though a judge had put this whole thing on hold, they were really worried because they didn't know whether they were going to step out and be, apprehended and sent to some detention center. So that's created a lot of anxiety. Things seem to be on hold, but I sense that students are really unclear on what to do. Should they remain in the country? Should they see this through from their home countries, hoping that things are going to get resolved? So There's really a lot of uncertainty.
And just very, very briefly, do you think there's now an opportunity for universities here in the UK, Europe and elsewhere to attract those students?
Absolutely. I mean, I was in Europe last week, actually talking to a university in Spain, hoping that some of these institutions would be willing to kind of attract and offer a home institution for them where they not to be able to stay at Harvard. And more broadly, obviously, I think this is the time for European institutions, British institutions, to kind of be aggressive in trying to bolster their PhD programs, their undergrad programs, and trying to attract all these highly talented people that are likely to be unwilling to come to the U.S. in years to come, fearing
Okay.
this sort of policies.
Paul Antras there from Harvard University. Really appreciate your time again here on Sky News. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.
We're just going to bring you up to date with some breaking news that comes from Russia. With the war with Ukraine. This is from Russia's negotiator saying that it has offered Ukraine a date and a place for negotiations in the coming days to exchange memoranda on the settlement. I think that's a literal translation, effectively saying that they are open to talk, says that Russia is waiting for an answer as soon as possible, confirming a telephone conversation with Ukraine's defence minister. So it does seem, from what we're hearing, is that Russia is offering Ukraine a date and a place for negotiations. We know they met, of course, a couple of weeks ago in Istanbul. That didn't go very far. But Russia seemingly offering the possibility of negotiations in the coming days after a telephone conversation with Ukraine's defence minister. We'll have more on that with Mark Austin at 5 o'clock. Now, the city of Leicester had once boasted that it clothed the world, but now the clothing industry, which is on the brink of extinction in the wake of scandals over sweatshop conditions, faces more challenges ahead, not least of all in the form of competition from China. Our economics and business editor, Ed Conway, has been looking at Leicester and its clothing industry.
And it's all used to be factories here.
Used to be?
Yeah, it used to be. Not anymore. It's all empty now. It used to be high, heaving in Leicester. This building used to have 2-3 floors, all factories.
This is all just in the last couple of years?
All in the last couple of years. All the decisions I've made from the top.
And the point was, we just don't want to buy from Leicester anymore?
Correct.
There's a phrase they say here: Leicester used to clothe the world. Once upon a time, garments and textiles made in Leicester were to be found on high streets and in cupboards around the globe. Today, it's a shadow of its former self. On the face of it, it's just another story of British deindustrialisation, but look closer and there's more to it. This is a story about fast fashion, about the impact of Chinese retail juggernauts like Shein, and about what happens in the wake of a scandal. Social worker Elias Musa has been in the industry for decades. These days, he supports workers fighting for their rights. And today, he's taking me to meet a knitwear manufacturer.
You want to sign in? I'll find that for you.
Our Fashion is relatively young, just 7 years old. They make dresses, jerseys and other knitted items for well-known high street brands. You might well have one of their items in your wardrobe, albeit with someone else's label on it.
These are Shimaseki flatbed knitting machines. Okay. Made in Japan.
But it, like every other garment manufacturer, is finding it difficult.
I'd say right now it's stagnant.
Okay, stagnant.
Last couple of years, yeah.
Doesn't sound that great.
Ultimately, it stems from the brands sourcing overseas. I think the way the industry is now, I'd say it's quite fair to say Leicester is on its knees.
In its heyday, when Philip Green's Arcadia was ordering large volumes of clothes for Topshop and Miss Selfridge, Leicester really was the garment capital of Britain. But when Arcadia collapsed, the industry replaced those big orders with smaller volumes, becoming a hub for fast fashion.
Now it's turned into little units as well, pop-up little factories, 10 workers, 5 workers.
Compared with how many before?
Compared to 50, 60 workers per factory. Since we had the scandal, that's when the downfall began.
10,000 people could be working in slave-like conditions in textile factories.
You'll probably recall what he means by that scandal.
How much are you paid?
Yeah, I can't answer that.
A flood of stories a few years ago about illegal workers, slave labour, pay routinely below the minimum wage.
He said, "You know, I can't give you minimum wage."
And dark factories, as they were called, much of the attention focusing on this building in the garment district. And on fast fashion brand Boohoo, whose alleged exploitation became front-page news during COVID.
Earlier this year, Boohoo cut ties with a number of factories in Leicester.
That was followed by an inquiry, criminal investigations, and, though Boohoo has committed to sourcing 1% of its clothing from Leicester, the vast majority of big-name brands have gone in favour of factories in North Africa and South Asia, where the glare of scrutiny is weaker, even if labour practices are the same or worse.
This is the front of it. You look at it, look how derelict, look. There's the machines up there.
Are they still making stuff here?
Yeah, they make stuff for cash and carry here.
So it's much smaller scale.
It's very, very, very small scale.
At this trade show, they're desperately trying to reclaim the city's heritage. One of its organisers, Jenny Holloway, fighting for the industry's survival. Despite those accounts of some dark factories still in operation, she says the exploitation of workers has now been rooted out.
I'm not saying that there weren't rogue traders, because there were. We had press pick up on some bad factories that were violating rights. They have long gone, those factories. So I'm not saying it was without cause, but I think it was the scale and the misrepresentation of that scale that was so damaging.
And what was the impact of all of that on this sector?
It's dramatically shrunk the businesses. There used to be 1,500 factories that were operating, creating 150,000 jobs in 2017. I know of about 100 factories that I would support.
There were 1,500 before?
There were 1,500,
There's now only 100?
Well, there's 100 that we know of.
It is a flabbergasting statistic, from 1,500 factories to just 100. 1,400 businesses with thousands of workers just gone in the space of a few years.
This is a great example, something that we're quite proud of. It looks like a normal skirt.
Yeah.
It's actually a skort.
A skort?
Yes, so it's
shorts.
Yeah, short in the side of the skirt, but it's also knitted as one piece.
Tejas is the third generation of a textiles family. His firm once supplied the country's biggest brands. Now they're barely clinging on. All because those orders from the high street names have just dried up.
It's a Leicester-specific thing, I've spoken to brands in the past who, if I moved my factory 15 miles north into Loughborough, would be happy to work with me.
For real?
Yeah. But because I have an LE1, LE4 postcode, they don't want to work with me.
Big brands?
Big brands. We're talking retailers that are, making billions in profit. But they have this stigma about working with Leicester and, there's unethical trade practices. My product is right. I'm an established business for over 30 years. Why don't you want to buy? Oh, it's because of your postcode. And that's, off the record conversation with buyers from multiple brands. Tej, we like you, we like your product, we like the way you do business. Company policy is not to work with you.
That's borne out by a new report from UKFT, Britain's fashion and textiles lobby group. It found that a staggering 95% of clothes companies have either trimmed or completely eliminated clothes manufacturers from the UK. Some 58% of brands by turnover now have an explicit policy not to source clothes from Britain. A couple of days after the trade fair, Tejas invites me to his family's factory to see the blowback to the scandal in person. They call it the Leicester effect.
So this is the last remaining unit that you've got, right?
Yeah. This is the last mill that we've got. We were in there, and there.
This used, in other words, to be one of Leicester's fashion hotspots. But on the other side of the road from Tejas is another empty plant. This firm, who declined to be identified, used to supply Marks & Spencer and Primark. The screen printing facilities here were second to none. Now, there's only a few machines still running. The rest of the factory is, well, you can see for yourself, more silent than a tomb.
Just 2-3 years ago, this was the single biggest production facility for dyeing textiles, essentially, not just in Leicester, but anywhere in the country around me. You can see these are the canisters that are used, that go into the machines, that create all of those amazing patterns. So, here's one of them. But there are thousands, and this is many years' worth of work, a kind of library of different designs, most of which, I'm afraid, are going to be destroyed because there are no buyers right now, and right now there is no activity. And so all of the machinery around here, and there's millions of pounds worth of machines, are all eerily quiet.
For the owner, who didn't want to go on camera, it's heartbreaking. The end of Leicester. The end of the city that clothed the world, whose machines defined the Industrial Revolution.
This is the last of 5 printing machines, all state-of-the-art, worth more than £1 million each. The other 4 have been scrapped, and that may well be the fate of this one as well.
While Leicester hogged the headlines in the heyday of fast fashion, its near extinction has barely been reported. Over the road, Tejas' new devices making sports and exercise gear sit alongside newly abandoned machines.
This would previously have been entirely occupied by all of the knitting machines, right?
We fitted 35 knitting machines in here.
Right. So this was a bustling,
yes,
kind of noisy place.
Oh, yeah. It's... it was very unique. You could tell by the sound which machine had stopped. You learned that after everything, there's a different hum to each machine.
But this is all happening now, in the past few months.
The decision was made the end of last year, the beginning of this year. We thought we'd see how it starts off, and it started off fairly poorly, and then it's almost like...
God, I hadn't realised it was quite so
Which
recent.
is why we don't like coming into this bit. It feels like we've been burgled. It feels like they've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left. I grew up with this noise and these machines. I used to sit with Dad, hand him parts to put on the machines, and now it's just an empty space that we've seen. And it hurts. It truly hurts.
That pain, felt across the sector, across the city, has been exacerbated by a new phenomenon, the rise of Chinese fast fashion brands Shein and Temu. Squeezed consumers turning to ultra-cheap clothes made in Chinese factories and delivered direct to UK households, tax-free. That's thanks to a customs loophole called Dominimus, which means individual packages sent here worth below a certain value don't pay tariffs. Donald Trump has promised to remove it in America. Here in Britain, the government has only said it'll do a review.
It is having an impact on our production. And I think the whole retail sector, or at least for clothing, they're feeling that pinch. And if we look at what Trump's done, he's just thinking more about his local economy because he can see the long-term effects.
You mean blocking some of those loopholes, like de minimis?
De minimis, yes. And I think that...
Should we be doing that here, do you think?
Yeah, I think it will make a huge difference. I think ultimately it's about a level playing field.
It's not all doom and gloom. There are still some factories left, some businesses still sending work to Leicester. But most brands still don't want to be associated with this place. For years, they squeezed the workers here until most of them eventually abandoned the city. If there is a light at the end of this tunnel, it feels further and further off. Ed Conway, Sky News, in Leicester.
Life, a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Let's get more on those markets now with Russ Mould from AJ Bell. Very good afternoon to you. Going to start with Kingfisher, whose share price down today.
Yeah, bottom of the FTSE 100 leaderboard last time I looked. And in the end of the first quarter statement, didn't feature any nasty surprises, but it didn't feature anything particularly good either. The UK and Ireland performed well, but there was a slowdown in evidence in Poland, which had done well last year, and France, a continuing difficult market. So two of its three big markets finding it hard. France, tax changes, legal changes. Poland, election, next to Russia, difficult markets, and that's not helped the share price or sentiment towards the shares today.
Yeah, indeed, even with the good weather. Let's talk about Nvidia. We're going to get their results out tonight, and we're expecting them to do pretty well.
They should do. I mean, they have flagged that they will take a $5.5 billion charge as a result of President Trump's tariffs and trade policies and attempts to restrict Chinese access to products. So that will take a bit of the shine off them. But most analysts will treat that as an extraordinary number, strip it away, and they'll look to the underlying figures. Sales are expected to be up 70%. Profits up pretty strongly. Probably of more interest will be what they say about the future. Will there be any more charges because of the trade policy, or do they feel that the things are going to start getting back to normal and that demand for chipsets that power artificial intelligence and AI, will that remain strong or not? And analysts are pretty convinced they will, given the company's stock market valuation isn't that dissimilar to the GDP of the United Kingdom. So which one would you rather choose, I suppose, is the question.
Ross, short and sweet. Like some of the best things in life. Thank you very much indeed
pleasure.
with the markets this afternoon. OK, that is it from me on Business Live for today. We're back, of course, tomorrow morning, 11:30. Join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin. Stay tuned for that. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.